We are live. Welcome to Future of Work 24 Hours Live, everyone. It took us a moment to get started today, as you know, technical difficulties are a part of the job in this online world. We're here for unscripted exploration in real time and talking about what comes to mind. We're thinking about unimagined possibilities today. I'm April Jefferson. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Hamza Suresh, and today we have with us Ted Raw from Sociocracy for All. So, hi Ted.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Ted, we're going to dive right in. Could you share with us, how are you exploring unimagined possibilities?
Let's see. I mean, it's hard not to make a reference to our conversation before we started recording because we were just waiting and chatting, right? And I was sharing about my co-housing community where I live. And to me, you know, I mean, the whole separation between personal life and work life in the first place isn't working for me, like separating it is odd. So for me, I think I would say that I live in that kind of future a lot of the time of my day anyway, because I live in a community. That's, I think, how the future should be for everybody. I work in an organization that is self-organized. That's how I think things should be. So there's not much I need to kind of imagine. I consider myself super fortunate that I'm already there a lot. What I would love to do is just to give more people access to that kind of thing.
Could you tell us a little bit more of like the community where you guys are self-organizing, what's that look like? And I think sometimes when you share a window into those things and how you're experimenting and how living, it probably does just that, give people access to imagine something different. So.
That's true. Yes, I'm happy to do that. So it's a community of about 70 people, self-organized. We each have our own houses. You're in mine right now. And we live here with a bunch of people in this house, but then everybody has their own house. And then there is one shared community building that is called the Common House. And that has a big dining area and a big kitchen and all kinds of extra kind of rooms that then everybody can use. One example is, for example, there are guest rooms in the Common House. So if I have people over, they just sleep in the guest room, which means I don't have to have an extra room. You know, and none of the other 32 houses need to have an extra room in case guests come, because we just pool our resources and everything comes together. We do meals together. And actually, here's one story that kind of illustrates what it means for me to be in co-housing. I was sick one morning and I was alone with my kids. And I was kind of just sharing with them of like, I feel like crap, you know, like, I don't know how to survive this weekend with you guys. And then one of my kids was maybe 9 at the time and said, Ted, look around you. Where are you? And I said like, I don't know, in a co-housing community, what do you mean? And she said, see, you're talking like you're alone, but you're not. Go ask for help. It's like, okay. So, you know, go to the listserv, go to my computer, write an email like, I need help, I'm sick. Somebody take the kids. 7 minutes later, the day was organized. Childcare was lined up. That would have been unimaginable for me without that. And it was just heaven.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Hamza, do you have anything like that with your family on how you all support one another?
Yeah, and this actually brings me to a thought that I had, you know, as we were talking about communal living and how essentially anyone who wants to move back to the land, grow their own food, live a healthy life, be part of the slow movement, all essentially are experimenting with these communities, not just experimenting, in some cases thriving in these communities. It makes me curious. So in terms of, you know, these communal movements, you know, and you know, the concepts of self-organizing or even sociocracy, So how are you seeing the interplay between that and perhaps intercultural contexts, such as, maybe cultures in Asia? Are you seeing that it's more well adopted in such communities where it's inherently and naturally a collectivist culture versus more individualistic culture in other parts of the world?
Oh, the whole intercultural things, that's always a big topic, isn't it? I mean, it certainly is easier to use a system like sociocracy in a culture that is not as individualistic as, for example, I experienced the US. I'm from Europe, so for me to the US is extreme individualistic already. Like I feel like a misfit here around that. Maybe that's also why we looked at co-housing here, because we lived at the end of a driveway for 2 years and that was just too far out. Yeah, I don't honestly quite know what to say about the question or to as an answer, because to me sociocracy is both, I guess, both a tool set and also a mindset, right? The tool set, I don't know if it's needed. Maybe people have their own solutions, but the mindset is of course very similar. It's all about, well, cooperation, about helping each other out, interdependence and all of that. Yeah, that's a fairly universal thing, not unique to sociocracy, but definitely connected to the tools that we use.
Yeah, I think about, for me, one of the biggest thing where I say my community like stepped up for me when my husband was, when it comes to health, sometimes things are sudden, no matter how young you are, when it happens, you realize your mortality, right? I remember my son, I was at work and he called me and said, like, Dad's on the floor, he's in pain, what do I do? And he knew to he FaceTime me or something like that. And I'm like, okay, I'll be right there. And find out I had convinced them, go to the hospital, discovered he had a brain bleed, and he was, and it took a while to figure out how to help him right there. But I was going through this and spending like every waking hour in the hospital, and it goes something else is just do healthcare where I believe in patient advocacy. That's another story. But the need is that so if I wasn't there, that someone was always there in the room, and people showed up for me to be there. So I always had someone there. My husband was never alone, and also at home, and how the communities we were a part of kind of self-organized and did meal planning and taking care of my kids, and we homeschool as well, and oh yeah, taking care of all those different things. And that's just self-organizing and working around that without needing me to be the one to do it. So it's beautiful.
What's I think really hard about the whole self-organizing piece of that culture change is the courage it takes to rely on other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not many people are willing to do that. Their life insurance is having a lot of money and a fence around their house, right? And my life insurance is living in community, but that's a whole different strategy. And so many people are really, you can tell from the story, when I was sick and my daughter scolded me for not reaching out for help, that also is deep ingrained into me of I should soldier on, and figure it out myself. And that's, I think, already that is such a huge transformational thing, to be willing to ask for help because you need it.
Yeah.
It's sometimes easier for the big things, right? When it's kind of so obvious and you can't do without, but how can we even do it for the regular things? Yeah.
To me, that it's a part of unlearning, it's if we learn that asking for help is a strength and not a weakness, right? It's unlearning that. It's it is. It's really a strength. It's to instead of it. How was that you have any stories around that?
I just love what you just said. Learning is strength, and recognizing that we're part of the interconnected system, and almost people are existential to your health and well-being, and you can't do it alone. And so I think, that comes with unlearning that comes with also having the systems in place where it's okay to ask for help, to rely on other people. And this reminds me of the blue zones of the world. I'm not sure if you're aware that there are, Dan Buettner from the National Geographic essentially went around the world to research and explore habits of the people who are centenarians. So, people who live, upwards of 100 years old. And what he essentially found was that, community living, that relationships and connections are a huge part of their success factor, I'll say, in terms of determining their longevity. So it's not just about what you eat. Of course, it's whole food and plant-based what they eat. They drink lots of green tea, and they prioritize movements throughout the day and so on. But it's also a big part of it is about community living and connections and spending time with each other. So, that's so interesting that sometimes it sounds so basic to the essentials of life, but yet here we are talking about why aren't we like that more, right?
How do you think companies can tap into this more,
Well, I mean, that as the two of you know, my day job is in sociocracy. So I think having a system, as Hamza was saying, about sharing, self-organizing, about interdepending, is really helpful, because you can't so much wing it in a company, maybe, or in any kind of bigger group. I think you can't wing it anymore. But I guess sociocracy is just a structure, right? It's just kind of the pattern language and so on. And then people still need to do the inner work alongside with that, to really truly arrive there. Just like all those different systems, like sociocracy, permaculture, nonviolence, restorative justice. They're all, there's too many to mention, right? But they all need to come together. And that is really those are the puzzle pieces of that new life. One little thing that came up for me earlier when you were speaking is, I remember the person here in my community that is doing a lot of the conflict resolution. She was mentioning that they get called in quite a lot about conflict, and that she wasn't really she saw it as a good sign. But typically when people ask, is there a lot of conflict in your organization, then people expect to hear that everything is harmonious all the time, but they don't realize that actually if people reach out, they say, we have a conflict, please help us, that is the good news. So the more conflicts you track that are coming to the surface, the better, actually, because we can assume that they're either way. So that's a little thing. Yeah, but ultimately, for me, around sociocracy, it's having clarity on who decides what, empowering people to decide things on their own, having a system in place of how that happens, creating the kind of meeting culture where people can really thrive and listen to each other. And then the rest of it is just people magic, as it would happen when you don't disturb it with coercive systems.
Yeah. And that's so beautiful. For me, it taps into when I say is that one of the big things about future work is that it's a gathering of different communities looking at the work differently. And like open space is a foundation of future of work, because I think it creates that invitation for all those things that you're talking about. It really dives into the mindset, and we can look at, I would say there's a box of agreement. And sometimes as communities, we may have different languages for the same things. And we can see that's how see the expression of that, and it's quite beautiful. People walking in their own mobility, as we would say in open space, as you talked about with sociocracy, is that's important. That freedom, and then what it invites in is something result. One of the elements that is exposed from that is people helping people. Right? People supporting one another. I think collaboration and creativity that they may not haven't even known, like being surprised What are your thoughts?
I want to piggyback on what you mentioned, Ted, about conflicts, which is so interesting because when we think about sociocracy, especially in the decision-making process, it's more about acceptance versus agreement, right? But I think there's also value in specifically disagreements. So I wonder if we can make intentional spaces for tension to arise in systems. And productive conflict is always useful. So how can we make spaces, for tension and divergent viewpoints to sort of, butt heads, so that what that could lead to emergent dialogues in a respectful and productive way, but in a way that maybe not everyone's looking at things the same way. Maybe we're aligned in terms of direction and values and the broader purpose, but in terms of how we get there or what we do, we're just not on the same page, and maybe there's experimentations on what's the best way, and there's lots of tensions. So maybe there could be value in creating spaces intentionally for that, whether in communities, organizations, societies.
Yeah, and exactly what you're saying. That to me is the why of consent decision making, because we want people's objections, right? That's why we ask, so that people can object, and those are those healthy tensions that then help us improve things. Another little thing, and that's not kind of in contradiction to what you said. I think there's a lot of both andness, right? In the whole place, like in the whole space, there is kind of experimenting, but there's also slowing down and listening, right? There's also like experimenting as in, let's just try something, and then there's also, whoa, let's go slow and first connect. And both of them have their place. And I always advocate for everybody to have a range, not always doing the same strategy, like just have a little bit of range and use some judgment about what to use when. But another little thing that I guess it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, that's why I'm bringing it up, and that is that it's because I assume that we're all different that I don't want to play for alignment, because that assumes that if we talk long enough, we'll all think the same thing, and I don't assume that. But I want to be able to make a step forward. That to me is exactly the strength. To me, playing for everybody needs to agree has this kind of glossing over of all the nuances that I find hard. So, and I think a lot about how much can we align and just find agreement on the next step forward, if maybe we are in a disagreement about something deeper. Like, can we, for example, I was talking to somebody whose background was very much kind of in the very traditional sense about what is family and so on. And there I was in a gay relationship, and I was wondering, could I even collaborate with somebody who thinks that way, But then we could totally collaborate, and it was not. So when does it impact our own sense of integrity, and when doesn't it, and what do we do with that? To me, those are all very alive and very open questions, and I think there is not one answer to it. So that's a big problem space for me that I'm really curious about. Curious what comes up for you guys then.
I think for me, Ted, is definitely that by engaging with others, being in community with other people, you unlearn different things, because we all have biases, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And then we're unlearning when we're engaged with people and thinking, maybe not so big of a deal. We can do a lot together when we open ourselves up and start getting curious. And magic can happen when you start getting curious. How about you, Hamza?
Yeah, I think this is so fascinating, because I think what I'm hearing you both say in some sense is that traditionally we've needed alignment to move forward into something. But we've not needed tension or disagreements or just not being on the same page and using that as an anchor point to progress in some sense. So I wonder, again, open question, what's the disagreement tip-off point that could be that's the point we say, okay, we're moving past this. We're taking the disagreements with us and moving past this. Rather, we're not breaking up, we're moving forward. But there needs to be guardrails, I think, like you mentioned, Ted. So could that be that those guardrails are there's a value system clash or violation, and that affects whether or not I decide to move forward. And maybe those are the guardrails in which I say, no, I'm walking away. That's the walking away point. But if not, maybe we take the disagreements and we move forward with the tensions alive.
Yeah, and that to me is, enough alignment for what? That's always what I want to ask. Enough alignment for what? And the for what to me, like our overall purpose or aim, whatever we might want to call it, that to me is the point, right? We just need enough alignment to do the thing that we're doing, and everything else to me is optional. Like, we can talk about other things and work through all the, I could spend some time convincing somebody what a family has to look like and so on, but that's I can do that, or I can, or I can skip it. I don't know, but I want to have enough alignment to know what we're doing next and what's on the table for us. So it's, I guess I personally find a lot of comfort and ease in being rather pragmatic about things, right? Enough alignment to do the next step. I'm already content. Thanks. So, but I think sometimes we get caught up in not finishing that sentence, enough alignment. To me, that is not complete, because I need to know for what. And that for what is actually the interesting thing that brings us all together, right? So it's, to me, that's a gap that I sometimes notice in group that want to get alignment, I think, for their personal sense of whatever it might be, comfort maybe, to know that we're all thinking the same. I know, I feel the urge to want that myself, but I don't think we necessarily need it as often as we think. Outside of 2 cents here.
Awesome. It feels like bittersweet coming to a close, but what I take away from all of this is that that we as a people, we have more in common than what we think, and that we can support each other in ways without harm to ourselves, and that, and actually it's probably going to be quite healthy for everyone by doing so in unique ways. So I leave this conversation probably more positive as always. And I just thank you so much for your time today, Ted. And for those who are watching, you can see Hamza and I back here in a couple hours. I think it's, maybe less than a couple hours, at 11, right? We're going to be talking to Mindy. And you can find Future Work 24 Hours Live. We're live streaming from YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter as of now. And we encourage you to like, share, subscribe, depending on which one of those platforms you are on. And we thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been a fun. Thank you so much, Ted.